there is one panel discussion, which is the spicy one. Are UN COPs still relevant? And when we thought about this title, we were like, isn't it too controversial for WWF to ask that question, given we are behind the COPs, we are the behind-the-scenes players to make those things happen. But let's start with a quick poll. So if you can scan the QR code and answer this very simple question, COPs will remain the primary platform to hold countries and companies accountable to the goals of the Paris Agreement. Agree or disagree? Your time starts now. You have 60 seconds. Yes, I'm trying to gamify this a bit to keep you awake. And I'm not a stand-up comedian, so I don't think I can crack really amazing jokes. Okay? I see some people are not scanning still. Please participate. This is good politics in action. Oh, wow, the previous one was, will companies and countries meet their net zero target? And 80% of you said no. And if UN COPs will remain relevant, 80% think yes. Is that a coincidence? We will find out in the next panel. Okay, 20 seconds more. And then I'm going to invite Singapore's Chief Negotiator for Climate Change onto the stage to tell you more about this. Oh, slight fall, 77%. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you to all of you who participated, 77 to 22. Don't know where the 1% left, but we will leave that for the next speaker. So allow me to welcome on stage Singapore's Chief Negotiator for Climate Change, Joseph Teo.
Hi, and a very good afternoon to you. I was a bit worried that I have to give a keynote address immediately after lunch, but thank you for that warm-up. And thank you very much for the response to the question. I almost thought I don't have to give a presentation, but now maybe I'll do. So if you bear with me, WWF is running a very tight ship. I have a deck of presentations prepared for you. It's quite dense, but I'm going to run through it very quickly because I've been told I only have 5 minutes. So bear with me if I just rattle off very quickly. So this is the overview of my presentation. I'll start with COP29 outcomes very quickly. So some of the key outcomes, the first key outcomes as listed on my slide is we got a new collective climate finance goal. There was a question earlier today, where is the money going to come from? We have reached a decision last year at COP. Let's see whether we can deliver that. But there's a rolling plan to scale that from 300 to 1.3 trillion. So watch this space for Bellum. Second key deliverable at COP29 was we fully operationalized Article 6 that will unlock carbon markets. And I know WWF is looking in this area in a big way. We hope Article 6 can then facilitate work in this particular very important area. Third key outcome is we started and kick-started the NDCs. NDC is nationally determined contributions. They are climate pledges from governments. At COP29, the UAE, Brazil, and I met a UK friend here, and just wanted to acknowledge that the UK, Brazil and the UAE started it off by announcing their NDC at COP29. Other countries joined in, not as many as we would like. So far, we have 22 countries, including Singapore, and 13, including Singapore, managed to submit our NDC by the deadline. To date, we have 22 now. So we are really hoping that the incoming COP presidency can give this a push and we get more targets on the table. Fourth key deliverable at COP29, we made some progress on adaptation. Again, watch this space in Bellum, because in Bellum, I'll come to Bellum later, but suffice to note, we made some progress on adaptation in Baku. Next, there was some progress in loss and damage fund. Again, I'm not going to go into details. It's on the slide. You can read it for yourself. I'm doing this, trying to speed things up very quickly. 6, we operationalized the enhanced transparency framework. Now, this relates to the questions about accountability, enhanced in a bottom-up nature of pledges under the Paris Agreement. The reporting framework that we have set up is the important framework that helps to promote accountability. And in Baku, every country now have to submit a report every 2 years, and in Baku, we got some progress there. And again, Singapore is one of those who were the first to submit our BTRs, the Biennial Transparency Report. 7, there are a lot of other agreements that we have agreed. I wanted to mention the Marrakesh Partnership. We extended it in 10 years, and Manuel, who will come on the panel later, played a key role in this particular area. And then, of course, there's the action agenda. Baku, Azerbaijan, the COP29 presidency announced a number of initiatives, got plurilateral countries, coalition of the willing to support. They're all listed there. I'm not going to go through them. That said, there were some setbacks. And the key is we had a global stocktake that we agreed to in Dubai. There were some disagreements as to how we should follow up on that. We didn't have a strong outcome on that. Mitigation, not very strong as well. The just transition, there were debates about whether it should be workforce focus or energy-related goals. And lastly, biodiversity, human rights, there were some progress, not as much as we hoped. So, of course, I'm here as Singapore's chief negotiator. I need to make a plug for some of the things we did. So we are one of the big supporters of the multilateral system and the Paris Agreement. So we submitted our BTRs. We announced that we'll submit our NDC on time, and we did. We supported the presidency in a big way by working with them to deliver Article 6. And of course, we signed on and we supported some of their initiatives. We mobilized partnerships at our COP pavilion. I won't go through them for interest of time, but suffice to say, finance was one big issue. Earlier in the session, we talked about systemic changes in the way we do things. Singapore is trying to put ourselves as a test of how we can galvanize private sector finance. And we launched a FAST-P initiative. Again, I will not go into details, but just to say that watch this space in Belém. We hope to announce further progress. And of course, youth. We haven't heard much of that today. Singapore brings a youth delegation with us every year. We want them to be our future actors in this process. Okay, preview for COP30. Ambition will still be high on the agenda. I mentioned the climate pledges that all countries are meant to submit. This is due at Belém. Actually, it was overdue. It's supposed to be submitted in February, but now parties are working to submit it by Belém. There are some other issues. We know that these pledges will not reach 1.5, so the mission roadmap to 1.5 will play an important role. Just transition. The focus and the mitigation work program focus is on forest sector, adaptation, and just transition pathways. Climate finance, we got a deal in Baku, but there is still the challenge of scaling up from 300 billion to 1.3 trillion. And here, private sector involvement is very important. There is a call for inputs as to how we can scale it up from 300 billion to 1.3. Your inputs are needed. Adaptation, we are going to agree, or due to agree on a set of indicators that will help all parties to track adaptation, progress on adaptation, action, and support. So Belém has a big adaptation will be front and center in the Brazilian COP. Loss and damage, we're looking for an early disbursement of funds to help those countries in need. We're making some progress already ahead of COP, and it's listed on my slide. Ocean and biodiversity, of course, because Brazil is Brazil is hosting it, there will be some focus on forests. Follow-ups to Article 6, getting projects off the ground will be one of our objectives, having finalized the rules last year. And of course, Brazil is putting a lot of efforts to this concept of global multi-RAO. It's it's really about forging partnerships. And that would be a preview of what is coming up at this COP. For Singapore, we heard about the challenges facing the multilateral system. We remain committed. We will support the presidency to deliver as much as we can. We will focus on implementation. And next, we are going to promote regional climate action. And lastly, we're going to try to get the bilateral partnerships going. And that's the end. Sorry for breezing through, but just wanted to give you a broad overview of the things that are happening in the G2G space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Not that we want to rush you, but we have other negotiators, current, ex, and others. So we want to hear more from others on the panel. So let me welcome once again Manuel back on the stage, COP20 President, Global Leader Climate Energy, Esther Ann, Chief Sustainability Officer for City Development Limited, and my dear friend and colleague in Singapore, our Global Lead for Carbon Finance and Markets for WWF International, Ruben Manukara. Ruben, over to you, and you're obviously one of the negotiators from the past, but you'll have less time, so I'll challenge you to keep this to 20 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Kamal, and a very good afternoon to everyone. It's encouraging to see a great crowd here, and I feel very energized by the conversations that we've been having at the site. But even more than that, I feel very privileged, because I'm privileged to be joined by three esteemed panelists. Collectively, they have more experience in COP than probably many of us around the room, and experience not only in the public sector, but as a COP president and also in the private sector as well as people sector as well, right? So that's a good kickstart of the conversation. And so maybe I can turn to Esther first. Right? I mean, Joe has kindly shared what governments have been doing at COP and the critically important role of governments and what they play at COP. But it would be great if you could share about what the private sector, but also the people sector can play at COP and the role that they play to drive climate action.
Okay, good afternoon. I need to speak very fast. Yeah, okay. I mean, I have the honors to have attended 5 COPs since 25 and also the earlier. Then I think I learned the ABC of COP. COP may not be able to solve every problem, but I think A is about alignment and awareness. And COP is really the very useful and impactful platforms to introduce global agenda, and such as COP26, the GFANZ about sustainable finance, transition finance, and also global race to zero. COP is really a very good platform to popularize new agenda and trends that can reach out to the world and also set targets. And the IFRS also launched the ISSB, International Sustainability Reporting Standard, which is actually adopted by many jurisdictions now to be mandatory requirement for SGX, Singapore Exchange. Is already mandatory from next year onwards that we have to adopt ISSB as the baseline for reporting. So A is awareness. You have to build awareness and to popularize it, and then to align, across sectors and countries. B is about business resilience and also business value. Because I'm from the private sector, I need to know if I align with global goals and national goals, what else can I bring back to the business? To what else can I create for my stakeholders and investors? So business value, long-term resilience, all those are very important for private sector. And C is also about collaboration. And I think the first 2 COP, I was there alone, mostly ride-ons to the UN Global Compact as a part of SDG Pioneer, and also World Green Building Council. Since 27, Shams, we have the Singapore Pavilion. So we have a home. And then with that, we actually have the stronger presence and louder voice, and we won't feel alone. And we also collectively staged quite a few panels to promote the agenda that we believe in and we are strong at, such as sustainable finance. And then, the rest is actually private sector definitely would take what the global negotiation, global goals as target, because NDC, in the end of the day, national targets is business targets. If we don't align, there's also regulatory, risk as well, and license to operate. So what we believe in as a business, we don't just talk about compliance. We need to go beyond and attending COP and interacting with the global alliances and also industry-specific network give us the privy to information, also trends. But it's up to individual whether you want to pick it up and to run in the front, or you want to wait for regulation, then you firefight. So I think COP really gives that opportunity for us to keep track of what is coming our way and build resilience.
Thank you so much, Esther. And you brought up a very good point about the role of COP in terms of aligning standards, right? So that they can be implemented on the ground. And I think in this space, CDL has been, or City Developments has been a shining light, being one of the first companies to submit the TCFD and also the first in Singapore to submit the TNFD. So congratulations on that. And that's a very clear example of how international frameworks have been implemented by companies on the ground. And next, I'll turn to Manuel and Joe. Right? We've spoken a lot and heard a lot from Joe and Esther about international frameworks. But at the heart of COPs and climate action is also action by governments and how those frameworks and decisions translate into domestic policies. And Joe, you are very much at the heart of Singapore's climate policymaking, and Manuel leading WWF's climate practice that through our many officers advise governments on how they can implement policy actions. So Manuel, if I can turn to you first, and if you could share some examples of how COP decisions and actions have translated into successful domestic policy actions.
Thank you, Ruben. So it is difficult to understand well what does it mean a COP. So let me start by saying something. You have just answered that COP it is still the most relevant platform, but not the single one. So that is one element. COP is the most relevant, but within the year, many things are happening in relation to the climate debate. G7, G20, UNGA, even this summit, it is part of the climate talks, and that is important to be considered. But also, let me say something else that it is so important, and let me start by sharing an anecdote. When I was appointed as president of the COP20, some friends approached me to ask me where to buy the tickets to go to COP20. So for people, it is difficult to understand what does it mean a COP. It is a fair, it is a market, no? How to get into. The point it is that COP, it is true that it is mostly a party-driven process to have negotiators taking decisions and implemented new mandates that they had received before. But fortunately, for now, it is not the only role of the COP. I am used to saying that to understand well a COP, we have to understand that there are 4 rings. The rings of negotiators, that is the most party-driven, and Joseph has just mentioned it. The ring of the thematic priorities of the presidency, it's a good place to take good decisions with a strong political support, and that could be the mandate for the future. The ring of the non-state actors agenda, or the Marrakesh Partnership, something that we started in Lima in 2014 with Paul Polman under the name the Lima Paris Action Agenda, that then switched into the Marrakesh Partnership. And the ring of the civil society, the activism, the pavilions, and all of that. And look, friends, in each one of those rings, you can get something. You can promote something that could improve the process, and that is very important. That is why in my intervention early in the morning, I mentioned the climate debate and the climate COPs are the most democratic one of the multilateral process in the UN system. What it is fantastic, and it is good to have Brazil now with the new name of the Mushirao, because in Portuguese that T sounds like sh, no? It's the Mushirao approach that means to promote public participation. But COPs are receiving a lot of critics. Some are valid, legitimate, some others are not correct. Because we, the human being, we are used to blaming somebody else when things are not happening as we had expected. So let me put a good example. The US has just decided to withdraw the country from the Paris Agreement. Who to blame? The COP, the UNSCCC, the Paris Agreement, or the US administration? Things are not happening because there are no NDCs on the table. It is because of the COP, or it is because of lack of willingness of some countries. that are not raising their ambition, that are not defining well targets, that are not moving things forward. And probably in many countries what it is happening, it is that unfortunately, we are leaving the climate things to the smallest piece of the cabinet, the Ministry of the Environment. And look, friends, I used to be Minister of the Environment, and I recognize that those ministries are the smallest piece. When you have to discuss with the Ministry of Finance, with the Ministry of Transport, you are a really small piece. So what we do need it is to promote internally the engagement, mostly of the Ministry of Finance. That is key. Without them, it will be more difficult to implement decisions that we are taking in the global arena. But it is more than just to talk about the cabinet in the executive branch. It is also to discuss about the role of the non-state actors, something that, again, we started in Lima, in the global arena, but we have to repeat and to duplicate in the domestic level. Because if we are planning, and fortunately that is happening, to make an economic case for the climate debate, we do need to have economic actors. And what is the key economy actor when it is about a domestic level? The business sector. It is the only way to implement. So that is why to have this kind of summits is the way in which we can bring together the government, the business sector, and the civil society to discuss and to see how can we improve things in a better way. So now we are coming into the COP30. And the COP30, as I mentioned earlier today, it is a place in which we will show the maturity of the economy to move this process forward. And again, I am optimistic that that could happen. But the only way to do it, it is by having all the actors in the same table. So let's protect that level of participation. Let's protect this democratic process. Because by the end, and this is my last idea, it's a process. Sometimes processes take time. Look, the Sustainable Development definition was launched in 1987 because our common future. And the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in 2015. So it's a process. And in case of the climate debate, we are talking about an agreement that it's including a ratchet mechanism that means that we have to gradually improve our targets, improve our actions, and achieve our objective. That is key. Last idea, my point it is we do need to strengthen accountability. That is, in my point of view, the weak part of the process. There are no mechanisms or a strong mechanism, the BTRs, the biennial transparent reports are a good instrument, but not enough to promote more accountability by countries. So that's the point. The point it is that for now, I don't remember, probably Joseph, you remember this, how many countries have already put the new NDC on the table? 40?
The new NDCs.
The new NDCs. 22 of 200 countries. So we cannot progress if countries are not fulfilling with their own tasks. That means to enhance their ONDC, to strengthen their target, to improve their actions. That is a domestic responsibility, and we have to promote more awareness in our countries that that is key to continue improving our climate action.
Thanks so much, Manuel. And you mentioned 2 points, many points of which the last two I'll pick up on. The importance of being part of the process, right? And also taking leadership following that process, right? So maybe I can turn to Joe. I mean, Singapore has been an active and engaged member of the process, of the COP process, and also has taken leadership in this space. So if you could share about some activities and actions that have translated from COP into domestic action from a Singapore perspective, Joe.
Thanks, Ruben. Again, conscious of time, there's so much to say. I'll try to condense my points a little bit. Firstly, back to the point about COPs and what signals does it get. So first point is climate change is too big for any one sector or groups to handle. We need all hands on deck. So that's my first point. Second point is COPs are the place where we set where we send the signals. And I think so far, we have, since the Paris Agreement has been adopted, we have quite a number of countries that have set net zero goals. Net zero goals, that's one. On the NDCs, we got a good number of countries that have set 2030 targets. We've only got 22 that have set 2035 targets, and the idea then is to ramp this number up in Bellum by the time we get a Bellum. Once the government set these signals or these targets, they send a signal to the private sector, to other communities to start to try to get things going. So that's my second point. My third point is because of these signals and because of the first point, which is we know we can't do everything on our own, each COP builds on the successes of each other. So I just want to pay tribute to Manuel because his COP brought in an emphasis on non-stakeholder participation. And I also want to give a shout out to the UK COP in Glasgow because at that COP, we saw a ramp up in the number of private sector commitments. And from that, Singapore took the reading that something is afoot now. We can set a net zero goal, and we decided to set a COP pavilion the following year. And when we did that, the reason why we did that is because we realized that we want to agenda a whole of society approach to dealing with climate change. Singapore has set a target, but we want the private sector to come along. We want civil society to come along. We want to base it on the work of academia, and our COP pavilion has become that focal point of solutions, of partnerships, of actions. Esther is one of those who participate in our COPs. We bring youth, we bring the academia, and I'm getting the sense from Singapore that because Singapore has because of COPs, we have set a target. Because we set a target, we have set a pavilion. Because we set a pavilion, we are engendering greater action from all the various parts of society, and that has emboldened action in Singapore, and I think we're very proud of it. It's still work in progress, as I said, and we're looking to future COPs to see how we can promote. Just one point about accountability. Singapore takes accountability very seriously. So whatever initiatives that we announce at our pavilions, we always come back the next COP to show progress on these pavilions. And I think that is the way to go because we need to hold each other accountable. Back to BTRs. BTRs is an important tool in the Paris Agreement that will show the emperor without its clothes in the end. So we're just submitting the BTRs for this year. After 2 or 3 cycles, you can draw a trend of where each country is performing vis-a-vis their pledge. And that's where you, the people, will have to raise it to your governments to say, you have pledged this, but your BTR says this, what is happening? And I think that's where the accountability will come.
Thanks, Joe. And what's clear from all 3 panelists, in fact, that the relevance and the importance of COP is clear. But at the same time, more needs to be done to continue to invigorate the process and accelerate the process. Because as we heard many times from other panelists in the sessions before, that we are very close to missing our 1.5 target and climate action needs to be accelerated. And one solution or proposals that have come up and also featured in previous COPs are the ideas of high ambition coalitions and clubs. And Esther, you are part of many such coalitions and clubs, not only in the climate space, but also in the nature space and the sustainable development goal space, right? So where do you see the importance and the role of these clubs in the COP process and also not only in the climate space, but to recognize the cross-cutting nature of climate action?
Yeah, actually, Joe, you are not just bringing us together, you are bringing us to run together. We are running very fast because of the targets, and we also be accountable. And climate action and nature actions goes hand in hand. You can't solve climate problem towards net zero without solving nature. And in fact, nature's cost and value is very high. 50% of global GDP, actually, highly or moderately dependent on nature. So actually, it's through COP that we are part of the Nature Positive by WWF, Nature Positive Cities Global Commission. So that is where I learned about nature positivity and also link it to nature-related financial disclosure. So last year, September 23rd, 2023, actually TNFD was first launched. And within 6 months, we rolled out our first TNFD report. And within another 3 months, we rolled out our mobilizing capital is important. So we packed a sustainability-linked loan packed to our TNFD targets. So we need to look at climate crisis, nature crisis, through the financial lens, and must build capacity as well. So with capacity, with capital, you can drive change, and nobody can cut across every sector. So as building sector with global presence in 29 countries and regions, we know we can drive change in the built environment, and we look at very specifically bring our value chain together.
Great, Esther, and I know we're sort of running short of time in the last 2 minutes or so, but maybe I can turn to Manuel and Joe. I mean, we are very much in the road up to COP30. So if you could share some of your expectations that you have for COP30 that would accelerate global climate action, please.
As I've already mentioned, I think that the economy will show maturity in COP30. But let me go beyond on that. Brazil is defining in their strategy 4 circles to move COP30 forward. One of those it is to have a global ethical stocktake. And it's so interesting because it will be the first time ever that we are bringing the ethical discussion into a COP, into a climate COP. And I think that is so, so important because when it is about climate, there is a moral imperative that we are not used to discussing. And I hope that that discussion could move things forward. But also Brazil is defining the circle of peoples. Because when it is about COP, we have to consider the climate extreme events and the most vulnerable people, the people who is suffering more and will continue suffering because the climate extreme event will join us for decades. The point it is how to deal with those difficulties and with that level of vulnerability of people. And a third circle that I believe also it is a good strategy, it is the circle of Minister of Finance. Again, because we do need to have on the table who has the power because of the budget, because of the treasury, because of the money, because of the resources. So I hope that by having these 3 elements, plus the idea of the Mushirao, that it is to promote more public participation, we can be more able to deal with the current geopolitical difficulties. In some way, what I think that Brazil is doing, it is trying to overcome the politics by having this kind of strategies. Because it does not make any sense just to face the political problem, but by not having alternative strategies. So I hope that by the end of COP30, we can celebrate because progress in what it is part of the mandate that Joseph mentioned it, progress because we are engaging better with finance, with the financial sector, public and private, progress because we are considering people who are more suffering, because let me finish with this idea. When it was before of Paris, it was a single product. We were all together looking for a single product, the agreement, and we did it. But when it is about implementation, it is as when you are a DJ moving the buttons of an equalizer to produce a beautiful music. You have to raise or to put down some buttons and to combine and to balance well to produce a beautiful music. That is the current role of a presidency. It is to combine the sounds of different actors to produce a strong outcome.
I think that's a beautiful analogy, Manuel, and I think with that analogy is also a good chance to conclude the panel. So, audience, you can put your hands together to give a big round of applause to the panelists here.
Wow, thank you so much, Manuel, Joseph, and Esther for that. I'm definitely going to look for the upcoming budding new climate DJs and nature DJs. Pick your whichever music you like. You can negotiate on climate or biodiversity or nature, but let's just be part of the solution. I think that's the message that we got loud and clear. There are lots of doom and gloom stories, but we must be part of the solution with or without the COPs or in between the COPs.